weather is and all these things. And he's like, gee, I wish somebody had told us that ahead of time, and ironically, when I was in Tampa, they were one room over and nobody ever connected us, because it just wasn't considered important. But now it was, especially as they heard that, the mountains were, 20,000 feet and that the weather was horrible and all these things. And so we tell them what we can do. And he goes, well, you guys are going to start doing a UW campaign, which is unconventional warfare. That's where you link up individual operational detachments or ODAs up with factions of the Northern Alliance, which were the allies that we were trying to coordinate with. So it went from there.
So, and I'm glad you brought up the 20,000 feet thing because I had it in my notes. I wanted to ask you in the movie, it's depicted that helicopters had never flown that high and they weren't sure whether or not it could be done. Was that how it actually worked in real life that you guys didn't know if the altitude was even workable?
Uh, yes and no, but not for the reasons that you might think. So helicopters had flown that high. Chinook helicopters routinely fly at 25,000 feet in Alaska, right over the mountains there. They do the rescue mission at the top of that. Was at Mount McKinley, I think. And so it is possible, but using carrying a usable load, going the distance that we need to go as far as, because we had to trade off fuel for cargo, if you will, people.
Right.
And so the math didn't work out, and we're wearing supplemental oxygen, or how long is that going to last, per console for the people you got on board. So there's a lot of calculations that have to go into this that, really weren't operationally proven. I mean, I operated in Colorado all the time, but that's nothing compared to Afghanistan.
Jim Nagy will join us. That's coming up in 10 minutes, the executive director of the Senior Bowl. Looking forward to that conversation. We'll get back into the conference championship matchups across the NFL as well. Plenty to discuss in both of those games. Chad, Novak Djokovic, Australian champion after a year from being deported from Australia, former champion.
What a comeback story.
And a year after
deported to champion.
He's unvaxxed. He chose not to do that. It's not like he was positive for COVID and they made him leave. It's because he wasn't vaccinated and they made him leave. A year later, the only way he's leaving is with the trophy. And it's interesting, the interview that took place last year where the guy asked him, are you willing to just throw away everything if that means, your legacy, if it means you're not going to get vaccinated? And he said, yes. Does it mean you won't win the French Open ever again? He's like, sure. Because he was set on his mindset and his personal decision. And you can see the jubilation a year later where he's the champ yet again. And the legacy is fully intact with how he's handled this compared to what we've seen over the last 12 to 24 months.
I mean, I know we're going to play some video and or have some audio we're going to play as well, so I want to react to that. But I think what Novak Djokovic was saying at the time, I don't know how many people are just truly ready to just give in their career to something that is so dumb, which was that, the mandates and everything else going on. I think Novak Djokovic deep down knew that the international stance on everything was going to change, was going to lighten. Deep down, he knew that, and that's what's happened. I mean, everyone's viewpoint on vaccination mandates and sports bans and everything else, it's totally different. I'll give you an example. We're going to the Super Bowl next week. A year ago, I mean, it was just short of sending off actual blood samples to the league to be able to be on Radio Row at the Super Bowl.
Well, based on where we were going. Remember, they were considering earlier in the season last year moving the site to
because
Jerry's
it
World.
Was so rigid with all the vaccination mandates and everything else. You're right. But having to have a vaccine card everywhere you went in California,
we were right on the tail
but
end
even
of
just
that
the
too.
NFL, everything to do anything with the NFL, you had to jump through all these hoops to be able to do it. I'm going to knock on wood on this again. This is how much I've heard about it. It's zero that I've heard about that for this Super Bowl in Arizona.
All season.
Point being, things changed. Times have changed. People have evolved, and we've got more information now. And that information shows that people like Novak Djokovic seem to be a little bit more right than other, so-called health experts on it.
Well, Chris Fowler also didn't want to dive into this with John McEnroe, who brought up the history, which is a part of the storyline as we watch Djokovic win his 10th Australian Open. Here was McEnroe's reaction, followed by Fowler, and it made for a back and forth that was cringeworthy in real time.
He got defaulted in the Open when he hit the linesman mistake. Yeah. He gets deported out of Australia, doesn't get any points at Wimbledon, can't play the Open.
Part of his choices, to be fair, he made choices that led to that. Some of those things.
I think he should have been permitted to play.
Okay, well that's a debate. Yes. But he did make choices that led to that. But that's forgotten for the moment.
Well, not just for the moment. I mean, and also, I keep going back to this. It's not like he had COVID and was told he couldn't participate. He just didn't have the vaccine.
It's also, he made choices. He made choices, Chris Fowler kept saying. No, the tennis institutions that he had been participating with for years and winning championships with, they made choices. They made the choice to change restrictions on everything, and that's what kept him out of it. He didn't change anything. He wasn't getting COVID vaccines 15 years ago when he was playing. He wasn't getting 15 months ago either. So they changed on that. It was their choices and his lack of willingness to give in to their choices that changed it. I mean, I know what he's saying. There's plenty of people who got vaccinated just so they could do things with their company or to go to events or whatever it may be.
Everyone can relate to that.
So, yes, Chris Fowler's right. He made choices, but he made choices not to bend to the choices made by these tournaments. That's what happened in all of this. So just to get it straight, it wasn't like Stetson Bennett went out and made choices that led to him getting arrested for public intox in Dallas. No, there were decisions made by those outside of Novak Djokovic's camp that led him to make a choice that he wasn't going to bend to those regulations, and because of that, he could not participate.
Chad,
Good for McEnroe, by the way, for stepping up and saying that.
It's a part of the storyline of why yesterday's win was important for him in Australia. Chad, coming up, we're going to dive deeper into NFL officials, the reason why, or in this case, why not, why the NFL doesn't have the emergency quarterback rule in place, and what feels like it went away 5 years ago. It was actually 12 years since we've seen the emergency quarterback piece to the NFL roster enforced. And it was Jay Cutler in the playoffs where we actually saw it with Caleb Haney as the emergency quarterback for the Bears. Again, 2011.
Not that
was the
long
last
ago.
time. We could have used it yesterday. Maybe one of these quarterbacks is participating at the Senior Bowl, but we'll start with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, on the big storylines at the top of the draft that we'll see this week. That's next on OutKick 360.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Just like that, the second hour is here. OutKick 360 Monday edition. Hutton and Withrow with you. Jim Nagy's the executive director of the Senior Bowl. He will join us in a matter of minutes. Looking forward to that chat. We'll talk quarterbacks who are participating, quarterbacks who are not. Stetson Bennett's not there. Hendon Hooker is going through the interview process. And tweets that will fill your timeline this week that we will just put to rest immediately with Jim Nagy. Looking forward to that coming up in a couple of minutes. Chad, one of the biggest surprises to me, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, was the player reaction to the Arrowhead trash talk on the Kansas City side of things. How much did we hear Arrowhead isn't to be messed with? This is our home stadium. It sounds elementary, really. But in a NFL world where the fans care way much more than the players do about wins and losses, the way that they reacted immediately after the game was more than just Joe Burrow isn't the best. Patrick Mahomes is. Our quarterback on one leg is better than yours. It was more about a slap in the face to the city and the fan base, and Kelsey and others took that personally. I was surprised at how quickly they went to that instead of just going through the motions of a celebration with the trophy.
Speaking of Travis Kelsey, during the postgame interview on CBS last night, the postgame interview, he jumped in and had this to say about Burrowhead.
Woo! Burrowhead my ass! Woo! It's Mahomes' house!
Not only that, but
it's Mahomes' house.
He then, in the trophy presentation, becomes The Rock from WWE and calls out the mayor, calls him a jabroni, and starts pointing to the fact that, this is Arrowhead, and begins to sing. It is. You would have thought they had just beaten. It felt like an underdog won the game. You know what I mean? The Chiefs, to me, have never felt like that with how they've played.
Look, I love it. Whatever it takes.
Oh, me too.
Whatever it takes. And I love this. Anytime a player acts like a fan in that regard and truly feels like they got upset about something that just mocked their home or their stadium or whatever it is, I'm always going to appreciate that, because we're all sports fans. We all watch for the same reason, because deep down we're fans of something, whether it be an individual team or watching the games themselves. So when players behave with that mentality, I'm typically a fan of it. What jumped out to me was just the level of this was the game plan. Mm-hmm. Like all week, it was, Burrowhead, huh? Oh, this cool Macaulay Culkin looking dude smoking a cigar, and he's Joe Cool, and our guy's not as good. That really fueled that team. Even Patrick Mahomes taking a shot at, I don't know that I have a cigar to celebrate this, but I'm going to do my best to celebrate it. There's a lot of animosity out there about Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Good on Joe Burrow and the Bengals, because that is a team that has gotten under the skin of the rest of the NFL. Certainly did so for the Chiefs. So I love that part of it. Let me also say, you won by a last-second field goal because of a late hit out of bounds, or that game's going to overtime. It's not as if they just rolled in and you wrecked them in that game. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment, don't get me wrong, but I think those WWE-type promos pay off more if you just shocked the world and blew them out at home in that game. That was not the case. It's another game decided by a field goal. So I say that, Hutton, to say, game on this rivalry. This is now the best rivalry in the NFL. These two teams. It is on now. Now that Mahomes, it sounds weird to say, but that Mahomes finally beat Joe Burrow in this matchup, and the Chiefs advanced the Super Bowl, it is game on for the best rivalry in the NFL currently.
Well, and also this was more than just this week. With the mayor saying Burrowhead and pointing to another Super Bowl run, which was idiotic because, again, it's easy trash talk that today's player is going to use as much as they can to their own advantage if the team's good enough. KC definitely is. This was the last three matchups rolled into one for Kansas City. The fact that, we've lost the last three. One of them was a year ago in the AFC Championship game. where we were up double digits. Burrow and company came back to win that game on the last-second field goal. The 3 times in the last full calendar year, that played a factor in the reaction post-game. I loved it. I'm not saying I was disgusted by it. I loved it. I was just surprised by it, with the way more than Kelsey came to the defense of Mahomes. Is that don't talk bad on it. Don't put this on. It's still Mahomes' league, or he's still the top QB. This was a chip on the shoulder for a team that is already in the dynasty category, if you really think about it. Going to their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years, and a chance for Mahomes to, he's already the Pro Football Hall of Famer, but to be up there with just the top guys that we're thinking of with multiple Super Bowl wins. You get where I'm going here. Traditionally, it's tough to buy into, they're the underdog. Well, guess what? They're the underdog today in Vegas to Philadelphia with a team that was put together, and they've been remarkable. But the team with the veteran leadership, the veteran coaches, a defensive coordinator that is a big game planner, and by the way, Mahomes, who's going to play through a high ankle sprain and play well, he accounted for all but 20 yards in this game, running and passing. I just think it's a rare moment where we see a top team point to the fact that they almost acted like they were the Bengals of last year.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
That's not a bad thing for them, and that's the way they probably viewed it. Hey, we have lost 3 in a row to this guy. Chris Jones even said post game, "Hey, it wasn't a rivalry until we just won. They won all 3. It's not a rivalry. We couldn't beat them until this past game, and we changed that, and now it's a rivalry between the 2 teams." So they definitely went into that game thinking like, boy, everybody thinks we're little brother.
Yeah.
We better prove them wrong. It was a brilliant way to approach the game for the Chiefs. Maybe it's because I've done some sideline reporting also. I get very uncomfortable when the players come in and start to say something to the camera or start yelling at the player being interviewed during the There's something about it. I love it when it turns out it's okay. But there was another player who came up to Mahomes first and was yelling and saying something. Then Kelsey did what he did. To me, it's almost uncomfortable for the player being interviewed that's just trying to do the interview when he's having to greet everyone coming up to him, on camera during the interview. But it was a fun, spontaneous moment, I think, for the broadcast and for that team.
But also, like the other tie-ins here, Andy Reid gets on mic on the stage and says, "Philly, we're coming." Former Philadelphia Eagles head coach Andy Reid, who, they put on this, the free agent market for head coaches, is now going against his former team. You have the Kelsey brothers matching up. The first time 2 brothers have matched up in a Super Bowl. Mahomes against Hurts in a prove-it year where Hurts is trying to prove that he can get Mahomes-like money. It's the storylines write themselves in the league. This is a Super Bowl where you don't have to manufacture things. It's going to be a layup in terms of reasons to watch.
Mahomes is also now just one of one in terms of category and what he's done this quickly in his career. 5 straight times he hosted the AFC Championship game, now going to a 3rd Super Bowl,
He's
trying
the youngest
to win his
ever,
2nd.
Youngest ever to win 10 postseason games.
Well, everything
that takes a while,
and we're
he's
talking,
done it already.
He's got the 1 Super Bowl, so that's going to eventually tick up also, and he's got a chance in 2 weeks to get his 2nd. But not just crazy statistics with passing. It's all of this winning and hosting that many championship games. I mean, hosting 5 straight championship games as a quarterback in your 27 is remarkable. So
in an
for
era
them
now
to
where
behave
it's
that
not
way,
crazy to think that he's playing until he's 40,
at least. But for them to act that way after that game, I think it shows you, even with the outward facade of getting ready for an opponent during the week, that was a lot of pent-up frustration about hearing way too much about Joe Burrow and that Cincinnati team and how they were clutch and the Chiefs weren't. That built up over the course of the week, and you saw it overflow after that game. I loved it. I loved every bit of it, and I know this about Joe Burrow. He's going to be ready the next time those 2 play.
That's right.
This is not a personality that's going to just wilt because Travis Kelce said bad things about his city's mayor. He's going to come back ready to go, and he's going to be pissed off for greatness the next time these two teams play. And I'm telling you, we have now set up, this is Brady Manning now moving forward with these two quarterbacks and these two teams leading to some epic matchups. I'm here for it. I'm excited.
Hit us up on social at OutKick 360.
Ace on our YouTube chat says Josh Allen is going to have something to say about this too when I'm talking about this quarterback matchup and these two teams being the best rivalry. Maybe, but let me say this right now about Josh Allen. He is a distant third between these two guys.
I don't know if it's distant.
I think it is.
I don't
until
know.
he does more in the playoffs, until he gets to a Super Bowl.
I mean,
he had that game a year ago where he gets a lot of the benefit of the doubt because of the coin toss, not winning it, because he was great in that game at Arrowhead. But I think right now we had Burrow then Mahomes. However you want to order it, and most would probably put Mahomes, Burrow. I think there's separation between those two and the rest of the pack.
I don't know, man. I don't think Josh Allen last year in the postseason is giving the ball back the way since he gave the ball back. He also had a better O-line, though. Yesterday was crazy.
That was not ideal protection for Joe Burrow.
Let's head down to Mobile, shall we? Jim Nagy joins us. He is the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, and he joins us the calm before the storm, where practices start tomorrow. Plenty of storylines. And Jim, first off, thank you for the time, man. Hope things are well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's great.
I said last year, I thought, and this has been going on for a couple of years now, that we have seen a swing in terms of GMs and scouts who point to this week as a big determining factor on draft weekend for why or why not they don't go a certain way on that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. When have you seen the shift in how teams approach this week compared to the Combine?
I'll just bring it back to my experience in the league. This is year 5 for me here at the Senior Bowl, 18 years before this in the NFL. And looking back, you always try to self-scout yourself and self-scout your team and why you made mistakes, why teams made mistakes. And I always felt like we put way too much emphasis on what the guys did in shorts and T-shirts are the guys we, quote-unquote, missed on, right? I told the guys last night at orientation, this is your last opportunity to play football. The rest of the process is, to me, kind of nonsense. It's become entertainment. You know, we all love the Combine. We love watching the 40s and all that. But this is real football. This is, you can see them compete. Again, what the separator is for a lot of our guys, they've had scouts come through their school all year. And I'm not trying to demean scouts because that's what I was for a long, long time. But when these GMs and these head coaches get down and see it themselves firsthand for themselves and not just hearing about it, seeing it, that's where these guys can really help themselves.
So I mentioned before you joined us that you were going to give a public service announcement for fans when they see tweets about teams meeting with players in Mobile. I'll let you say it, but I think it's good advice for the clickbait and the tweet bait that's going to happen from reporters this week.
Yeah, it's I could say this. All 125 players are going to meet with all 32 teams while they're in Mobile, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 times. We've got 5 different interview blocks. So if a team does their homework right and they really want to meet with a certain player, they can leave here with meet with the guy 3 or 4 times. So yeah, a lot of clickbait out there. A lot of sources say this guy met with this team, and man, it's such garbage. If you say right now, you know, spoke to an NFL source or an NFL scout, like that stuff is, I mean, everyone likes it, right? I try to stay away from that stuff. So I just put it out there. It wears me out to see that so-and-so met with such and such team. Well, of course, all 32 teams are going to meet with every kid on the roster.
Chad, we should send out a tweet.
It's a great PSA from Jim.
All players will meet with every team per source.
I can also guarantee you that it will not stop reporters from posting little 2-paragraph stories about a player at the Senior Bowl meeting with the team they cover. So that you're going to get tidbits like that constantly because they need material during this period of time where everybody's getting ready for the draft. So, Jim, if you can, walk us through the invite process for a Senior Bowl invite and how maybe informal conversations can happen throughout that process, and specifically how that pertains to Stetson Bennett not being a part of the Senior Bowl this week.
Wow, to me, that's two different questions, but I'll try not to be long-winded on the first part, the process part. It's really a year-round deal. We'll get done with this year's game. It's a really taxing week on our staff to throw something this big. So we take a couple weeks off. We'll come back in the middle of February, and our scouting assistants have already started watching tape on 2024, so they're already building next year's board out. But then we'll all come back in, get cranking on it. I really won't move on to the next year until we get through this year's draft, but we'll go all summer and all fall, watching tape, going to games. That was the goal when we got here 5 years ago, was to build a real football operation, which we've done. I mean, we had 9 former NFL scouts on our staff this year, 170 some years of experience on the staff. And we'll get to like the beginning of November where we feel good about our grades and where we've got the board set. And then the last part of that is roping in the NFL, and 20 years of relationships in the league, and getting on the phone with personnel directors and GMs that, are willing to share grades and kind of go position by position. And we just, for instance, like the quarterback, okay, here's the 4 guys we like. We're locked in on these 4. We got 2 spots open. Here's a couple guys we like. Who do you guys like? And we have good back and forth. And again, no ego in it, because these rosters aren't for us. It's for the 32 GMs in the scouting department. So we'll use that feedback, and then we rip the invites out beginning of November.
So in regards to Stetson Bennett, did he ever have an opportunity to take part in the event?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we reached out. I never officially sent anything, because at this point you're sending a text basically. There's like a little web link that we send them and they sign up. But yeah, I was working through it with Stetson's people, and I thought this game made a ton of sense for him. What he did in Athens was incredible. But Stetson Bennett with his chip on his shoulder is a different quarterback than he's going to want to be in the NFL. Like, the NFL wants a backup that's dependable, stable, reliable, supportive of the starter, low ego. And this was an opportunity for Stetson to turn the page. Had a great college career, won a couple net, but that's in the past now. He's got to look forward to what he's going to do in the pro career. He had an opportunity to come here and be on a team with Luke Getsy, who's the offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears, on a team that, has a murky backup quarterback situation. And he could have really helped himself down here, and he chose not to. And I hate to see what happened. I hate to see what happened. My phone was lighting up the other day, and obviously he's not in a great place, because that stuff doesn't happen if you are. You shouldn't opt out of the Senior Bowl and then have that happen like the day of arrival. If he just comes to Mobile, then he doesn't get in that trouble. But really, I'm worried. I'm concerned that Stetson's in a great spot, because he had a great college career.
Jim Nagy joins us, executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. Clarify something for me, because Hendon Hooker's there. He's injured, so he's not participating in the week of practices, but he can meet with teams. So what's the protocol for a quarterback like Hendon Hooker being there versus Stetson choosing not to be there and meet with teams? If you get where I'm going here. When I heard he wasn't participating in the game, I'm thinking, well, surely if he's invited, he'll go and participate in interviews, but that's not the case.
Yeah, it's a total one-off deal. It's not good business for us to bring a guy down that's injured. The year of COVID, we kind of went. The year of COVID was different. We were the only thing that happened that year in the draft process. No combine, no other all-star games. We stuck our necks on the line and bubbled this thing and tested everyone every day, and spent $600,000 in COVID costs to have the game. And we had Devontae Smith in the game, Landon Dickerson in the game, guys that were committed since the beginning of November. And then subsequently they got hurt in the college football playoff and couldn't come compete. But in a year where there was nothing else in the draft process, I just felt it was the right thing to do, to bring those guys, let them connect with the teams face to face. And that was their only shot. Well, fast forward the next year, and there were agents wanted me to bring injured players down to the game. And we're like, no, we're not about that. But in this case, at the quarterback position, where classroom time is so valuable, interview time is so valuable. And for a guy like Hendon, that really was one of the faces of college football this year, he really earned the opportunity. So for him to come down and go through the week, he's going to stay through Friday, and just be in the room and get these face-to-face meetings with teams. Again, one-off thing, but I was just trying to do the right thing by Hendon.
So that's your call. You're certainly getting feedback though from the league on who guys want to talk with, I'm assuming, or am I way off base on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, Hendon's a guy that he started the year. We had him in the 4th round area, along with Bo Nix. Really, the 2 guys for us that had day 3 grades coming into the year that ascended and finished the year for us, for our staff in that day 2 area, was Hendon and Bo Nix. And that's really was the consensus of the league as well. Most of those, those guys were like 2s and 3s, but mostly 3s on both of them. So yeah, why wouldn't we bring a guy that most of the league had, late day 2 grades on, that really deserves this opportunity, earned this opportunity?
Jim, over the years, who's made the biggest jump this week? And for what they turned into, or the rookie season they had, or the biggest jump in the perception of the player versus when you brought them in?
One that comes to mind stemming off last night, Jalen Hurts. You rewind 3 years ago, Jalen was a 4th or 5th round pick, consensus in the league. I think we did our calls that year with 16 or 17 teams. Nobody had Jalen a day 2 grade. He had a great week here. He really threw it well at the combine too. I sat in the end zone in Indy that year and watched him throw from behind like I like to do with quarterbacks. Had a great throwing session there. Ended up going in the 2nd round, which is a nice 2 or 3 round jump. And then now in hindsight, look at it. He should have been a top 5 pick. But there's usually the guys that make the biggest jumps are the small school guys. A year ago at this time, Cole Strange from Tennessee Chattanooga was a 5th round pick for most teams, 4th, 5th round, but mostly 5th. And he had a great week here and fought his butt off and competed against the big boys and ended up going 29 overall to New England. So, I mean, he made millions and millions of dollars. So usually those small school guys, but a guy like Terry McLaurin from Ohio State came down here as a 5th or 6th round pick a couple years ago and got all the way up to the 3rd round. So for a big school guy, 3 rounds, that's a really big jump.
Final thing for you. Well, 2 things first. First, the deepest position in terms of quality of player this year is where and why?
For our game, I'd say running back. There's only 8 of them, but that's really a tough spot for the Senior Bowl to get, really top tier NFL backs. We've had some good ones. Tony Pollard from Memphis made the Pro Bowl this year for Dallas. He was in the game a few years ago. I think we had 4,000-yard rushers in the last 4 years since we got to the game. But this year's group of Kenny McIntosh from Georgia, Chase Brown from Illinois, Tajay Spears from Tulane, that's a really talented group. I mean, I think there's going to be 3 or 4 NFL starters out of that group, and the rest of them all really good complementary backs. So again, tough position for us historically, but really like this year's group.
And in terms of job interviews for your staff, if they come in and say Reese's instead of Reese's, is it an automatic crumble it up, throw it away?
I learned this right away when I got the job with the title sponsor. It's not Reese's Pieces, it's Reese's Pieces. So that's kind of how I.
Chad has gone on this.
I have just crushed people over there, and you hit it right, Jim. It's not just Reese's. People like to say Reese's Pieces, and I'm thinking, you don't want to rhyme a candy with feces. That's not the mental image you want. It's Reese's Pieces. Pieces is not a word. I have no idea why they even take it that far. Yeah.
Don't double down on it. Don't double down on a bad pronunciation. Yeah.
Well, we just want to clarify. It is Reese's Pieces for those that get confused by it. Reese's Pieces. That's it.
Jim, do you miss scouting, like in the nuts and bolts of it, or is this giving you the fix that you need?
No, because that's all I do. I mean, I do more. I do more now.
You do more, yeah.
Running a business, but no, I still get that fix. And for me, I could have easily just went along with the way this, things have gone on the All-Star circuit where, and just sat in this chair and watched tape by myself and picked players. But that's not fun to me. I wanted this to be a real collaborative process. That's why we built out the operation like, we spoke about at the beginning of the segment here. It's a lot of fun, to have guys and feel a connectedness and debate players. And that's what I love. That's my passion. So again, this has been a good job because I've been able to grow a little bit personally, and I'm around great people. But yeah, the football side of it, I get plenty of fix. I'm out at games every Saturday in the fall, and I just love being around the staff. So I do miss draft time. Like this is fun watching where our guys go and get drafted. We've had over 40% of the last 2 NFL drafts in our game, 106 players each of the last 2 years. But being a part of it and those April meetings leading into the draft and sitting collectively with a bunch of guys, and then that night after the draft, knowing that you picked hopefully 6 or 7 guys that help you get to a Super Bowl the next year, there's nothing that can replace that.
I wonder too, Chad, like we've seen, of course, Super Bowl Radio Row, Combine has really grown over the last 15 years. I wonder if we eventually have a packed Radio Row at a Senior Bowl. I don't know if we'll get there in the next decade or so, but if we do have that option. Jim, you got to have us down.
I think it's growing.
We're getting there. So, a couple years ago, we only had like 3 local radio stations down here. This year we have 16 with a
That's
good
awesome.
national presence. So you guys got to make it down some year.
We would love that, man. We need to have you back on the show too. We appreciate the time today and the insight on everything going on this week.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
There's Jim Nagy,
Thanks,
the
Jim.
executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. Great visit there. Great perspective on Bennett, Hendon Hooker with the exemption, which is something he's not going to hand out again anytime soon, it doesn't sound like, and the interview process. All 125 players will meet with every team across the league, Jack.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway there is going to be Stetson Bennett. He went in depth about this guy's probably a backup quarterback in the league, and the qualities that NFL teams want from a backup quarterback: reliable, dependable, lack of ego in the locker room, and he had a chance to prove to NFL teams that he could do that. And that's strike one against Stetson Bennett. He chose not to go and instead got arrested for public intoxication in Dallas over this time. And he talked about his chip on their shoulder. That served Stetson Bennett well throughout his career. There's no doubt about it. But, I mean, there comes a time where you got to show you can do anything. Tim Tebow had to swallow this at some point, right, where he said, I want to be a quarterback, but I'm willing to do anything to keep playing the game, even if that means being a backup quarterback or a wildcat option or playing tight end or different things. I'm not saying Stetson Bennett's going to change positions, but if everyone is saying you're a backup quarterback in the league, maybe you got to start out by being a backup quarterback in the league and then prove people wrong again and go win a starting job.
A year ago, though, we weren't even talking about him being a backup in the league. Coming up, more Super Bowl storylines as the Eagles will face the Chiefs. That's next on OutKick 360.
NIL, when it comes to Florida, has been a story over the last couple of weeks because of Jaden Rashada. And you put out a great piece with a timeline on kind of how things went down, who kind of was the one involved in this, situation with Jaden Rashada. And so let's kind of dive into that. Coming off your reporting, and I don't want you to give everything away because I want people to go and read it. But what we're kind of looking into this thing for the last couple of months, man, what were some of your big takeaways? Maybe shocked you, or you just, when you dug deep into it, you're like, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right.
Well, I think that's probably the first thing to note is this has been ugly publicly for 2 weeks. But as you said there, it's been going on for 2 months. And I think the big thing is, and I didn't really touch on it in the story, it was so interesting to follow Florida and Miami this year. Obviously, you've got John Ruiz, a billionaire, pretty deep pockets, and he's just throwing money and caution to the wind. Wanted to see his Hurricanes get back to the top, and there were so many instances, more than I can remember since I've been covering the team since 2013, where Florida and Miami were 1-2 or in the top 3 with commits in the same class. And I think Florida just came out second place or third place to Miami so many times. And I think what precipitated this whole incident was Florida trying to get a win back. And this was right after Cormani McClain shocked the world. And it was right after Florida had gotten back into conversations with Jaden, because prior to him coming to Miami, they were sent to the scholarship offer. I think saw the writing on the wall. Jaden had told them, hey, I'm going to go to Miami. And I think what you got was Florida and boosters or collective people around Florida like, hey, we need to get a win. And I think you saw really a year-long battle between Florida and Miami, collectives and boosters, that Miami was winning. I think you saw Florida try to get back into it. And whether the money was never there and there was miscommunication, or if the money was promised and then somebody came off, and was like, hey, that's a lot of money. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't know. We probably need to get to litigation and some discovery to find that out. but for whatever reason, the money was not going to be there, and the Gator Collective kind of realized that, and with their name on the line and their name on the contract, terminated the contract.
Why do you think we've gotten into besides the rivalry between Miami and Florida, Cristobal coming down to Miami, Billy Napier's at Florida now. You got Norvell, a lot of people thought was hanging on by a thread at Florida State. Now he kind of turns it around in 2022. Okay, so he's set for the next year or so, maybe 2 years. We'll see. Well, why do you think it turned into a pissing match between Miami and Florida? It's like when NIL struck, it felt like those two teams, and not Florida State. I'm not trying to diminish Florida State, but it felt like Miami and Florida were just going back and forth and seeing who could either outbid the other, or B, take it one step further when it comes to recruiting. Is it because of Ruiz, and is it because of some of the boosters at Florida? Is it that simple?
I mean, nothing is black and white in our world, and you're probably looking at way more colors than even black, white, and gray when it comes to NIL. And in this scenario, I mean, this is a landscape that Nevin Shapiro would have thrived in. Wouldn't have had to be so sneaky.
Coming up in just under an hour, we'll try to explain the history of the NFL doing away with the emergency quarterback situation for rosters on game day, why that came about, and why it's about to return, at least in my opinion. And it's affected by yesterday's issue, but it's more than that. That's coming up in about an hour. Chad, just recapping some of the conference championship games, the two conference championship games. Philadelphia, you're right. The path to the Super Bowl has been laid out perfectly on a red carpet for them. Credit them for taking advantage. They have not looked rusty, right?
No.
That's the thing. They went through the Giants, who they're facing for the third time in the season, which is always difficult. And they went through the NFL's top defense yesterday. And while Philly wasn't great yesterday on a stat sheet, I think they averaged, less than 4 yards per play total. The way that they have gone about these two matchups tells me that they should be, for the most part, firing on all cylinders. And if they're not, they're deep enough at every position to not just compete, but win the Super Bowl even on a bad day. Kansas City's the same way, because they have had more role players step up this year than I can remember in a long time.
Well, the Eagles talked about the lack of rustiness. I mean, they're up 14-0 on the Giants in their first playoff game, and it was over at that point. When Brock Purdy went down, I know the 49ers scored to make it 7-7 on a great run from Christian McCaffrey. That game was over. Hassan Reddick was terrific, and he's been great all year for the Eagles defensively. And the way they can play you with their two corners, Bradbury and Slay, with the Eagles, great cornerback play. There's just, you go back to that Super Bowl team 5 years ago. This is their second Super Bowl trip in 5 years. This team, to me, has far fewer weaknesses.
Yeah.
I can't, it's tough to just pinpoint if they get this right, then it'll be okay. I mean, even looking at the Chiefs now with all the injuries at receiver going into this game and already losing Tyreek Hill from the previous team, that's the one where you say, Mahomes is great. Are they going to have enough help at receiver? I look across the board with Philly and the way that roster is built, Hutton, I can't find a big glaring weakness with that team right now that you can just pinpoint and say, you must attack this to beat the Eagles. The bottom line to beating the Eagles, the Chiefs will have to play their best game of the year in order to win this game. That's what it's going to take to beat this team.
They're fully capable of rushing the passer. Wait, I know Philly is. Kansas City proved that yesterday.
They are.
They're going against, if not the best, the second best offensive line in the NFL. Some would point to Detroit being the number one offensive line, but Philly's excellent in this regard. The thing is, this is not just a special run. The 2017 for Philly was a special run. This is a special season. And in a weird way, that was the year that Philly got off the plane, and they were wearing the dog masks for the underdog role with Chris Long and all them.
Yep.
And in a weird way, it feels like Kansas City's about to do the same thing. They're going to play that underdog role up because right now right now it's Eagles favored by 1.5. I think the betting
opened at 2.
I think the betting public will eventually have that game go up. I think Philly by the end, people will be convinced that Philly's offense is just too good for KC to slow down, and their defense is going to give Mahomes fits, something that Cincinnati could not do in this matchup. I think this is going to be a really good game. And traditionally, the Super Bowl is a slow starting game, right? There's a feeling out process, and then you see
you also have the week in between now, the 2 weeks off.
Yeah, which is going to really help KC and the wide receiver issues.
It's also should help, I would think, Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, looked terrific to have suffered that injury the week before. There was not, you could tell, especially when he was walking to and from the huddle at times or to move around.
Yeah.
You could see him favoring and limping on that leg. But once the ball was snapped, I was looking for big moments of, oh, man, now that's where he's playing off one leg. The only times I could really tell was when he just had to totally arm blast the thing, where you could just see it was all
a couple
arm.
of times. Yeah.
He couldn't set up his legs. He completed some passes doing that too. But where he was really having to use his arm and arm strength more than planting his feet. But other than that, to make that play on the 9-yard run, that became a 24-yard play because the 15-yard personal foul at the end of it that set up the Butker field goal to win it, that's going to go down as one of the legendary Mahomes plays because he did that on one leg. He did not want to run in that game, and he was able to pick up a first down
and the way he took
with
off,
his legs.
You couldn't even tell he was hurt at the time.
He had the ability to block it completely out
now
and just go see red and go get the first down on that one where he ran through the pain.
This the vice president of sports medicine and performance for the Chiefs tweeted out. This is a cool thing. He tweeted out a photo of a woman named Julie Freimeyer holding the AFC Championship trophy, and she's in Chiefs gear. And I'm like, okay, well, I thought it was a fan. I really did. The tweet goes, "Thanks for the support, and if you love the way Patrick played, then love this person, Julie Freimeyer. She designed and executed the rehab last week." And, she's going to be known in many households in Kansas City based on the performance of the quarterback in a crucial week going against the team that's won 3 straight against them in Cincinnati.
I would love to, and maybe we get Pro Football Doc on, Dr. Chow to talk about this with us, because 2 weeks now to get ready. Do you just put that thing up in the air for the next 2 or 3 days, knowing it's going to swell up, knowing there's going to be pain, and do nothing on it? Or do you go see Julie Freimeyer, I think you said her name was, and you immediately get back to whatever routine they were doing for the next 2 weeks, knowing that practices will eventually be a part of it? And the dude did not miss 1 rep in practice on that ankle. The toughness of Patrick Mahomes cannot be overstated on this one, because that is a lot of pain he's having to deal with over the course of the week and during the game.
And we said last week.
And I loved his response. I was tired of answering the question, how are you doing? Because it didn't matter. I was going to play no matter what. So his thinking is, I'm not doing well, but stop asking because I'm going to have to push through it and get through it to play in the game. My mind is made up. We're playing the game no matter what. Stop asking me how I feel. I'm not going to answer, so stop asking.
You knew, though, on Wednesday when he was practicing last week that he was going to be fine. He was setting. It was setting up for this. It wasn't it was a painful second half for him. You got the sense Mahomes was going to have a Mahomes-like performance, but Cincinnati was capable of still continuing to win in this series. And Mahomes, again, had the ball last, and he plays winning football. When he's got possession late, you know he's going to go down and get points. The other thing, a couple of unsung heroes in this game. Isaiah Pacheco.
He's good.
Outstanding. Just dual threat and gives them a sense of a run, even though they didn't run it well against Cincinnati. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I think, especially with the injury issues, the big catches he came up with, not just the touchdowns, but the big grabs on the other end, other than Kelsey. He is one of the winning role players for Kansas City that you can point to. And then one of the finalists for Defensive Player of the Year, Chris Jones. Mentioned last week, can he crush and collapse the inside pocket for Burrow and get him on the move? The answer is yes. And it wasn't just Jones, but in the biggest play, his second sack of the game on third down, gets to Burrow and forces the punt that ultimately leads to a great return. We have the Mahomes run, the personal foul on Osai, and the kick by Butker for the win.
I also thought a lot of this, I thought the KC offensive line was terrific, but they also were not dealing with a heavy rush most of the game.
Yeah.
Lou Anarumo has this method with Patrick Mahomes. It's actually proven to be pretty effective where you just drop 8
you
and
don't
play
blitz him.
coverage.
That's
Because
what the Titans would do against him.
He's much better when he gets blitzed and is making a quick decision. When you drop guys into coverage, it's more effective when that happens. Did it again, but I thought the Chiefs' offensive line still held up well and did a good job where the fact he wasn't knocked out of this game, given the injury he was dealing with coming in, that's credit to the Chiefs' offensive line.
And just while you're saying knocked out of the game, I'm thinking the fact that Nick Bosa wasn't knocked out of that game earlier, where he's on the sideline on a punt return, and he gets cleated and slashed on his leg. The following series, he's rolled up on that same leg, and he's limping around. I'm thinking, man, if Bosa goes out right after Purdy goes out, wrap it up. I thought the 49ers defense was capable of getting turnovers. They didn't in this game. Big ones that flipped the script, and the rest is history, 31-7. But Bosa, man, he was... I've never seen anything like that, where he's slashed by the cleat.
Great performance by that Bosa. Did you see the brother Bosa, Joey Bosa, walking into the stadium with 49ers gear on?
No.
Getting heckled by Eagles fans? It's terrific. There's just a group of Eagles fans.
I love that.
Talking trash, saying, hey, Joey, where are the Chargers playing this week? Why aren't you with the Chargers right now? Why are you guys not playing? And Joey Bosa took the bait and does not look great in it because he says something about I can't even say one thing that he said because who knows? But in today's climate, if it'd be okay. But he's talking about, you're going to Snapchat me, huh? Because they got their phones out doing the video.
Yeah.
Here's a word for Joey Bosa. I'm sure he had a few pops in the tailgate before going into the game. That's one where you probably just say, all right, guys, have a good one. You got to understand you're the celebrity in that moment. Have fun, Eagles fans. Have fun. I'm here supporting my brother, and just keep walking. But he kept going back to the crowd of Eagles fans, and those Eagles fans got exactly what they wanted out of him, was for him to talk back and start talking trash to them. Eagles fans, by the way, are relentless. The videos that are out there, there's stories up on OutKick, of them just marching out of the stadium, surrounding 49ers fans, taunting them, is something else. I don't know whether to respect it or hate it, given that you're doing that to a team and a fan base that just watched not just one, every quarterback on their roster go down, to where at the end of the game, George Kittle's having to answer questions about not having a functional quarterback in the game to throw the ball to him. Eagles fans don't care, though. They do not care.
If you have to grease the light poles in your city for an NFC Championship game 5 years after you won the Super Bowl, solid reaction and response from a fan base that you're expecting on behalf of the police precinct there. And they did that.
Bradley Cooper was fired up, too. Showed him
Bradley
in the suite
Cooper
during the game. Rob McElhaney of one of my favorite shows, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He was at the game.
A couple of other celebrities that were really interesting.
Was Kevin Hart there?
I didn't see Kevin
Remember,
Hart.
he was all over the sideline when they won.
Oh, yeah, tried to get into the
he got
trophy
shooed away
presentation.
because he was on the podium.
Mike Trout Mike Trout's who I was thinking of. He was shown. Massive Eagles fan. Mike Trout.
Mike Trout's going to be your next Philadelphia Philly, probably, with the way they're spending.
And
anything to get away from the Angels.
And think about that. The string of success where success comes in big spurts for cities. Philadelphia with the Phillies making the World Series. You have, of course, the Eagles now back to the Super Bowl. For years, it was Boston. Tampa has certainly seen it with the Lightning and with the Bucks. The Rays have been playing well. There's the Dodgers and the Rams. Right? There's always an example of a franchise that can point to Cincinnati even last year with the college and their pro team.
Yeah, it is. Well, we saw it. The golden era of Boston, starting in 2004 with the Red Sox, is the one that really spurned a lot of success. But it is crazy how it's cyclical with these towns.
Coming up, we discussed this late last week that Marcus Stokes, the four-star quarterback who mentioned a racial slur on social media, was let out of his scholarship offer by Florida. He was offered a scholarship and accepted it from Albany State, but that has been rescinded as well. Details on this story next on OutKick 360.
NIL, when it comes to Florida, has been a story over the last couple of weeks because of Jaden Rashada. And you put out a great piece with a timeline on kind of how things went down, who kind of was the one involved in this, situation with Jaden Rashada. And so let's kind of dive into that. Coming off your reporting, and I don't want you to give everything away because I want people to read it. But what we're kind of looking into this thing for the last couple of months, man, what were some of your big takeaways? Maybe shocked you, or you just, when you dug deep into it, you're like, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right.
Well, I think that's probably the first thing to note is this has been ugly publicly for 2 weeks. But as you said there, it's been going on for 2 months. And I think the big thing is, and I didn't really touch on it in the story, was it was so interesting to follow Florida and Miami this year. Obviously, you've got John Ruiz, a billionaire, pretty deep pockets, and he's just throwing money and caution to the wind. Wanted to see his Hurricanes get back to the top, and there were so many instances, more than I can remember since I've been covering the team since 2013, where Florida and Miami were 1-2 or in the top 3 with commits in the same class. And I think Florida just came out second place or third place to Miami so many times. And I think what precipitated this whole incident was Florida trying to get a win back. And this was right after Cormani McClain shocked the world. And it was right after Florida had gotten back into conversations with Jaden, because prior to him coming to Miami, they had rescinded the scholarship offer. I think saw the writing on the wall. Jaden had told them, hey, I'm going to go to Miami. And I think what you got was Florida and boosters or collective people around Florida like, hey, we need to get a win. And I think you saw really a year-long battle between Florida and Miami, collectives and boosters, that Miami was winning. I think you saw Florida try to get back into it. And whether the money was never there and there was a miscommunication, or if the money was promised and then somebody came off, and was like, hey, that's a lot of money. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't know. We probably need to get to litigation and some discovery to find that out. But for whatever reason, the money was not going to be there, and the Gator Collective kind of realized that, and with their name on the line and their name on the contract, terminated the contract.
Why do you think we've gotten into besides the rivalry between Miami and Florida, Cristobal coming down to Miami, Billy Napier's at Florida now, you got Norvell a lot of people thought was hanging on by a thread at Florida State. Now he kind of turns it around in 2022. Okay, so he's set for the next year or so, maybe 2 years. We'll see. Well, why do you think it turned into a pissing match between Miami and Florida? It's like when NIL struck, it felt like those two teams, and not Florida State. I'm not trying to diminish Florida State, but it felt like Miami and Florida were just going back and forth and seeing who could either outbid the other, or B, take it one step further when it comes to recruiting. Is it because of Ruiz, and is it because of some of the boosters at Florida? Is it that simple?
I mean, nothing is black and white in our world, and you're probably looking at way more colors than even black, white, and gray when it comes to NIL. And in this scenario, I mean, this is a landscape that Nevin Shapiro would have thrived in. Wouldn't have had to be so sneaky.
So Marcus Stokes, the quarterback from Nice in Florida, has had another offer rescinded, this most recently in a matter of days, hours, by Albany State. And head coach Quinn Gray, former Jacksonville Jaguars backup turned starter for a short time. He's the head coach at Albany State. And at the HBCU program, extended the offer to Stokes, who had posted a video of himself singing lyrics using using a racial slur. And they've since, Gray then apologized for extending this offer Stokes' way and says he needs to do better in representing the school. When we were setting this up last week, Chad, I'm thinking you want to talk about a reclamation project. The fact that Stokes is willing to go there and the fact that they were willing to offer him, I thought was a great process that should be commended. And instead, over the weekend, it turns into, yet again, the reaction causing another reaction, this time with Stokes again having an offer rescinded.
It's just, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you had to know.
Yeah.
You can't just claim, oh, I didn't know the whole controversy. I mean, any Google search of the name Marcus Stokes is going to show the story at Florida. So if you're going to do it, I mean, I commend him for giving the kid another chance by offering him in the first place. So if you're going to do it, just stick with it. Instead of having to come back and apologize for something, just stick to your guns on that one. Now, I'm sure Quinn Gray got a lot of pressure from within the university, from his bosses, from everything else, that he probably had to rescind the offer. But we apologize too much. Just
well, you
stick
can tell,
with it.
based on his statement, you can tell that he was told to do this. I was trying to help the student get back in competition, and in my haste, I did not consider the impact and decision it would have on all of you. Frankly, it wasn't my place to use ASU as the platform for redemption in this case. I regret that I used flawed judgment. If given the opportunity, I will do better. If given the opportunity. So he's saying this in regards to his position, his job as coach. And here's the 4-star recruit now, again, looking to play college football somewhere.
Yeah, and the story that this is from HBCUGameday.com website, says that Alabama A&M actually followed up with an offer later in the week after Albany State. As of now, they have not rescinded. This is another HBCU that has offered him. So if that's the case,
and
he still may have an opportunity.
West Florida has also done this. They've offered him, I'm saying. So maybe he gets a chance to prove himself and prove himself to his teammates as well. You know, there will be a coach that lets him play football next year. The question is where.
At this point, I'll be surprised if it's at an HBCU, though.
Yeah, yes. Or at a Power 5 conference where he was originally going to go.
That's not going to happen.
Headlines next, including conference championship weekend.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
The final hour is here, Monday edition. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for joining us across the OutKick Network for OutKick 360 with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine here at 6th and Peabody. We're going to be discussing the emergency quarterback protocol, or the lack thereof, in the NFL. Saw that on full display as the Eagles took down the San Francisco 49ers yesterday. And backup quarterback's not needed, even for an injured Patrick Mahomes. Chad Henne could stay on the sideline because Mahomes was just fine. And how he performed in the Chiefs' win, setting up the game-winning field goal. Other headlines out there. So Broncos owner Greg Penner met with Jim Harbaugh recently. This is after Harbaugh has released a statement. We've seen Santa Ono and his praise for the Michigan head coach. Now, another Michigan man, Adam Schefter, clarified what this was, which was just the Broncos circling back to make sure that Harbaugh was certain that he was going to stay in college. This was not at Harbaugh's request. They flew in to meet with him. And I'll read just from Schefter. Harbaugh met last week in Ann Arbor to discuss Denver's head coaching position without any deal materializing. Although Harbaugh 2 weeks ago announced he was staying at Michigan, Penner did his due diligence and still traveled to Ann Arbor to meet with the coach in person like he's done with 7 other candidates during this head coaching search. The follow-up conversations were part of the process for both Denver, led by Penner and general manager George Paton, and Harbaugh. The face-to-face meeting came after Harbaugh's initial video interview at Denver, after which he pulled his name out of contention and reaffirmed his commitment to Michigan.
I don't buy any of it.
It's hard to, yeah.
They're all lying. Well, why would you have someone fly in for a second face-to-face or a first face-to-face after you pulled your name out of the running for that job? Why would the Broncos waste the time and the energy to go meet with Jim Harbaugh? That's a ridiculous statement from Adam Schefter. He's covering for his university because right now it looks like Jim Harbaugh doesn't want to be at Michigan because he's saying he's going to reaffirm his commitment there, and then he's talking to the Broncos again?
Well, if he didn't want to be at Michigan, he can take the job offer from Denver, which, I mean, they're flying into Ann Arbor to meet with him. They're not meeting in Los Angeles like they've been doing with the other candidates.
Why are they waffling? Why is he waffling?
Again,
why,
if you don't want to be there, he's got options.
Well, why is he taking the meeting? It's so odd.
Why is he not taking the job with Denver?
Why is he? Okay, 2 things. Why is he releasing a statement saying, I'm here at Michigan twice, once from Santa Ono, once in his words, that he's staying, and then take the meeting after the fact?
Well, twice,
because
but
because the
within
Broncos
seconds
are
of
doing
each other,
their
though,
due diligence?
from the team, from the university.
I don't buy it on either end, is my point. Why would the Broncos fly in if they didn't think they had a chance?
Well, because I don't know what they're offering them, but they're clearly going to meet with them to say, "Are you sure? Because we're here and we want you." I don't know of any other.
We're not taking no for an answer.
I mean, were teams flying to Texas to meet with Matt Rule, or was he going to them? He was going to them.
Matt Rule, you're talking about for Nebraska?
No, out of Baylor. Whenever he was at Baylor and he took the job offers, he wasn't. The Jets weren't flying to him. It was the other way around. This was unusual that they're going to Ann Arbor to meet with him, and he clearly turned them down. Unless you, and now if he comes back and says, "You know what, I am leaving."
Well, the only thing unusual about it is these statements he keeps making. Just stop with the statements. If you're still entertaining the notion of going to the NFL now, he's going to do this every year, is my expectation.
Yeah.
He did it last year. He's doing it again this year. But if you truly are staying right now, you're not allowing the Broncos to I mean, think about the headache this is. You told the Broncos to go ahead and fly into Ann Arbor to meet with you?
No, he removed his name from consideration. And I think.
And then they flew to Ann Arbor to meet with him?
Yes, they flew in to meet with them because here's my guess. They know DeMeco Ryans is taking the Texans' job.
Yeah, of course.
And they don't like any of the other candidates left because Sean Payton's not going to take it. DeMeco Ryans is going to go to Houston instead of Denver. And so they're circling back with Harbaugh, who entertained their offer but chose to stay in college, and they flew to meet with him instead of the other way around.
There's something very much up with all this, I guess is my point. And maybe it's that Jim Harbaugh just hates Ward Manuel, and he's going to continue to play this game to just screw him over?
Well,
because
but Santaona would do away with Manuel for him.
But we know how diehard college football is and college football fans. And for a sitting head coach, the ilk of Jim Harbaugh, to say, yeah, come to Ann Arbor on your private jet. No one's going to find out about that. And try to woo me again to be the coach is just odd decision-making for a man who just released a statement reaffirming his commitment to stay at Michigan. If they wanted to up the ante because DeMeco Ryans isn't taking the job, you get on the phone or get on a Zoom with them and you make your final pitch. My point is, I think Harbaugh okayed them to come in, which it's like he's playing this game again of maybe not. Maybe I will do it, Ward. What are you going to do about that, buddy? What if I have them come to Ann Arbor to meet with me? It's a very odd decision. Typically, when coaches want to meet, especially in college, want to meet with someone about a job, they do it in a neutral third-party city.
Which is why it's on Denver, not on Harbaugh, Chad. That's what I'm saying. Denver tried to double back and convince him to leave again.
But did Jim Harbaugh take the meeting? Did he meet with them?
Yes.
He does not have to meet with them.
Well, they flew into Ann Arbor and apparently met with them in person. I don't know. We don't know how long.
I just don't.
And if it was such a big deal, I'm surprised that it happened last week. We're just hearing about it yesterday or Saturday.
My point is, I don't think that the Broncos are flying in and showing up at the facility and banging on the door outside and saying, we're not leaving without meeting with Jim Harbaugh. I think he said yes to meeting with them in Ann Arbor for that meeting to actually happen. I know it's the Broncos wanting to do it.
But the only difference is when colleges fly out, when ADs fly out to go get their guy, they come back with their guy. And Harbaugh didn't leave with them.
I know. But why, if he's meeting with them, why is he doing that after he's saying he's staying?
Well, maybe he wants another race. Santaona, pay him. They will.
It's just an odd story. Again, if he was legitimately flirting with it, which I don't know that he was. I think he's making a show of it by now.
I
think you'd meet them somewhere else to say, okay, here's what it'll take for me to be had, to leave even after I release that statement.
And I don't think there's any coincidence that Greg Penner's the one making the flight, because he's the one that reportedly has a disagreement with Sean Payton and the overall power struggle that Sean Payton wants. They've had multiple guys that they want to coach the Broncos, and so far they're 0 for 3. It started with Harbaugh. Harbaugh removed his name even before Sean Payton had an interview with them. Sean Payton has a power struggle issue going on with a member of ownership. Reports are that's Penner. And DeMeco Ryans is informing them that he's not interested in the job. That's because he's going to go back to the team he played for in the Houston Texans. And he's now eligible to interview. If you coached in the conference championship weekend, today's the first day that you can interview for a second time among those coaches. And DeMeco Ryans is doing that with Houston, presumably.
Well, Urban Meyer's available if they want to go get a big name. It's pretty clear the Broncos are just saying, we're swinging for the fences.
Well,
we want the biggest name possible. We want name recognition. And none of these other candidates are worthy right now. So we're not going to do Sean Payton, not going to hire him because of all the power he wants. So we'll double back down on Jim Harbaugh. I don't know who's next on their list.
Sean Payton.
That would make sense.
Why wouldn't you double back on Sean Payton?
Well, if this guy is a big part of the ownership group, Greg Penner, and if he's got a big enough beef with Sean Payton that he's the one holding it up because the power structure, and he's the one willing to jump on a plane and fly to Ann Arbor to go meet with Jim Harbaugh so he can go back to the ownership group and say, hey, I got Harbaugh. He's ready to go.
Who does it remind you of?
I don't know that he's going to circle back.
He's an owner, not the AD, but it reminds you of a Tennessee predicament that they were in.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he is going to, if he's that strong about it, willing to go on a flight to go see Jim Harbaugh, that he's suddenly going to come back and say, yeah, forget what I said on Sean Payton. Let's do it. Let's give him everything. He's got full control. Can't fire him.
Well, but
whatever the guy's asking for, which
no,
I don't know what it is.
I don't think it's can't fire him. I think it's Sean Payton wants total control over George Payton, the general manager, and decisions on the entire organization. That's the sense based on the $20 to $25 million range per year and certain control over quarterback. They're married to Russell Wilson contractually. And I also think, it means more for Denver to get their type of coach because the rest of the candidates are Nathaniel Hackett 2.0 from what they thought Hackett was and why they were bringing him in and how it turned out. Now, it's not going to be hard to do better than Nathaniel Hackett as a first-time head coach. That's not what I'm saying. But you're going to go get a first-time head coach. And instead, they're going after guys that have coached in a Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl, and the up-and-coming defensive coordinator, not the offensive mind from Green Bay who didn't even call plays. This is DeMeco Ryans that they're trying to get because that's the guy that's next in line for the openings of the remainder of the league that are about to go on a long run, I think, with a news spree over the next 24 to 48 hours. A lot of teams decide on who they're going to hire. That's where Denver is compared to Indy, Arizona, who just hired their GM, so they're going through the process again, and Houston, who's battling with Denver and appears to have won it with DeMeco Ryans. Unless DeMeco shocks us and takes like the Arizona job or something.
Well, it's pretty clear they want a big name in Denver, which makes sense because they got a big name ownership group with the Walmart family taking over. If you're not willing to give Sean Payton the control, Jim Harbaugh is the obvious next choice of the biggest name you can get. And the fact he's 44-19-1 as an NFL head coach, had a great record in his time with the 49ers. All I'm saying is stop releasing statements that you're reaffirming your commitment to Michigan if you're Jim Harbaugh, if you're going to continue to take meetings with other teams. Now, he's clearly still going to be the coach if no deal came together, but it's very odd decision-making, I think, all the way around. Call me crazy. I thought that big statement was Jim Harbaugh does not love the options this year, and he's going to wait a year. I don't think he's committed to Michigan forever. But when he made that whole to-do with him and Santaono about, staying at Michigan, I was not expecting another meeting with the Broncos to take place after that statement happened.
The news is out on Brock Purdy's injury. He has a complete tear of his UCL in his throwing elbow, and he's going to undergo surgery, which can take up to 6 months of rehab. He's getting second opinions, and the hope is he can go undergo a repair, not reconstruction, which would be Tommy John surgery, and then be ready for training camp, where the battle heats up with Purdy coming off this injury against Trey Lance, who was on the deck in week 2 to be replaced by Jimmy Garoppolo, who leads to Brock Purdy, who leads to Josh Johnson, and then back to Brock Purdy with a complete tear of his UCL. So the idea that you just get a shot and you think this guy wouldn't have done that if he could have? It's not the same as a high ankle sprain in this case, and he's undergoing surgery for 6 months of rehab.
Well, and even everyone that was seeing the injury, that was watching it, and people I follow that are in the medical practice on Twitter, they were saying the issue is the injury and the way the arm was hit. He can't feel anything. It's not a pain management deal. It's a stinging sensation that leads to you not being able to feel your hand that well. So it's not a, where there's a will, there's a way type thing. Or like you said, Hud, it's not a put a shot in the elbow and you're fine. You can't feel the ball enough to throw it in that spot. So that's a really bad injury. That injury also, any team out there that may have been thinking, oh, my team can trade for Trey Lance to be the quarterback because of Purdy's success, that dream is over. It's going to be a Purdy-Trey Lance battle.
And how about going into the offseason for both Pollard the week prior against San Francisco with the broken ankle, and the week after Purdy with two guys with a chance to cash in a bit now on the rehab and on the mend. Chris Mortensen points out, though, Jake Delhomme had Tommy John surgery in 2007. 6 months later, came back and said his arm was better than ever in terms of throwing the football. So it's not uncommon for a football player to get this. You hear it all about it from the mound in baseball. Mortensen saying it's not uncommon to hear success stories and that he could be ready for camp based on the timetable.
I think everything that I've heard about the injury and read about it, it's a lot easier to come back from it and be productive for many years as a quarterback throwing a football as opposed to a baseball pitcher. Baseball pitchers come back from it too, but the wear and tear and the motion of throwing the baseball, that's why you see more of the injuries happen in baseball. It's harder to sustain a career after that surgery as opposed to football where it's not nearly as hard to sustain a career. That's good news for Brock Purdy.
And instead of the wear and tear at age 23, it's the hit from Hassan Reddick, which is also intriguing, the backlash that we're hearing from about Shanahan and the play call where they have a tight end matched up against Hassan Reddick. But what people fail to realize is they're going play action on that play. And so to set up like you're going to run it, that's why you would put a tight end on the best pass rusher, because you're going to run the opposite side. And then your tight end should be able to block for the run, and you go play action on the pass. That's what they were trying to set up, and of course it failed miserably with Hassan Reddick and practically any other pass rusher for Philly who's had a ton of success. By the way, Hassan Reddick, Carolina had him and Christian McCaffrey, and they're not on the Carolina roster right now.
And you know what else Carolina doesn't have? A quarterback currently.
Yeah.
That's not a great situation to be in.
Could it be Aaron Rodgers? They're in the NFC. Green Bay apparently wants to trade him to the AFC if they're going to.
They're not a terrible roster.
No.
Outside of quarterback.
I don't think so either. In fact, many were saying, like, going into the offseason of the jobs that were going to open up, that they were in the best chance and best place for success, given the division, given the attention to the young talent on defense, and what they've acquired in the trade for McCaffrey.
We had Dan Z on from OutKick last week, and I agree with him. His answer was a good one about why would a team limit themselves? You know, what's your ultimate – why are you so worried about trading him to an NFC team as opposed to AFC team just based on the possible playoff matchup? You understand not trading him in division where you play them twice, but I agree with him. You don't want to shut off half the market based on what you could get in return. So if there's an NFC team that's got a better trade package, you should definitely consider that NFC team and not just say, oh, we're only trading to an AFC team. To your point, Hutton, if the Panthers come to bat and are willing to give up more than any of the AFC teams, you trade Aaron Rodgers to the Panthers. You don't worry about it. He's going to play for, 2-3 more years? If you like your plan and your roster moving forward and what you do as an organization, don't worry about it. Trade him away to an NFC team and get the most you can for your team.
I love the headlines over the weekend that were saying the Packers and Rodgers, they were at a crossroad. Of course they are.
Yeah.
This is 3 years in the making. Rinse, repeat. We saw this in January of 2021 and how it played out. We saw it lead up to last year and the contract extension and the $50 million payday per season that is upwards of 60 next year if he's on the roster against the cap, I'm saying, that they're going to have to restructure and get that down. And now potentially trading him. I just get the sense he doesn't want to be there. And he met for a day and a half with Packers management, according to reports, right after they were eliminated against Detroit. So now it's about ironing out the details. And will they do it early on in the offseason? Is this going to be one of those trades that you see a month and a half, 2 months prior to the NFL draft, where a team goes ahead and gives up those picks in exchange for Rodgers? Or does it matter? And you do it over the draft weekend whenever Green Bay is going to need to make a decision one way or the other on what they're doing with them. Either way, the price tag's going to be steep.
Those two sides have been at a crossroads since the drafting of Jordan Love. That moment forward, it's been one big crossroads, one after the other, for the Packers and Aaron Rodgers.
Coming up, we'll discuss Damar Hamlin and his message. Have you heard any from the conspiracy theorists on whether or not he's...
You know,
have you heard anything about body doubles with him?
I read from the guy last week who kept insisting that there's something. You know, I hope there's not, but there could be something to
Nick,
it.
was that his
Why
name?
is he? Yes, Nick. Good memory, Hutton. And
Hello,
I
Nick.
rarely do this, but when that video was released, I had to go search back for a week into my mentions, and I found Nick, and I just put that video up, and I said, "You convinced now?" And
any response?
His response was actually okay. He was like, thank God he's okay.
We'll hear from Hamlin when we come back. We will also discuss a sign of the times, and Chad, it's our generation that has failed miserably in this regard. We'll have photographic evidence of this.
Which way? We failed so many ways.
Well, in regards to sports fandom, and we're talking about New York and Philly.
Oh.
And we will also discuss and try to explain why the NFL did away with the emergency quarterback option and how teams may approach it moving forward and what the NFL needs to do based on certain protocols in place in the league now that were not in the league whenever they did away with the emergency quarterback provision. That's next on OutKick 360.
NIL, when it comes to Florida, has been a story over the last couple of weeks because of Jaden Rashada. And you put out a great piece with a timeline on kind of how things went down, who kind of was the one involved in this, I don't know, situation with Jaden Rashada. And so let's kind of dive into that. Coming off your reporting, and I don't want you to give everything away because I want people to go and read it. But what we're kind of looking into this thing for the last couple of months, man, what were some of your big takeaways? Maybe that shocked you, or you just, when you dug deep into it, you're like, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right.
Well, I think that's probably the first thing to note is this has been ugly publicly for 2 weeks. But as you said there, it's been going on for 2 months. And I think the big thing is, and I didn't really touch on it in the story, was it was so interesting to follow Florida and Miami this year. Obviously, you've got John Ruiz, a billionaire, pretty deep pockets, and he's just throwing money and caution to the wind. Wanted to see his Hurricanes get back to the top, and there were so many instances, more than I can remember since I've been covering the team since 2013, where Florida and Miami were 1, 2, or in the top 3 with commits in the same class. And I think Florida just came out second place or third place to Miami so many times. And I think what precipitated this whole incident was Florida trying to get a win back. And this was right after Cormani McClain shocked the world. And it was right after Florida had gotten back into conversations with Jaden, because prior to him coming to Miami, they were sent to the scholarship offer. I think saw the writing on the wall. Jaden had told them, hey, I'm going to go to Miami. And I think what you got was Florida and boosters or collective people around Florida like, hey, we need to get a win. And I think you saw, really a year-long battle between Florida and Miami collectives and boosters that Miami was winning. I think you saw Florida try to get back into it. And whether the money was never there and there was a miscommunication, or if the money was promised and then somebody came off, and was like, hey, that's a lot of money. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't know. We probably need to get to litigation and some discovery to find that out. But for whatever reason, the money was not going to be there. And the Gator Collective kind of realized that. And with their name on the line and their name on the contract, terminated the contract.
Why do you think we've gotten into besides the rivalry between Miami and Florida, Cristobal coming down to Miami, Billy Napier's at Florida now. You got Norvell, a lot of people thought was hanging on by a thread at Florida State. Now he kind of turns it around in 2022. Okay, so he's set for the next year or so, maybe 2 years. We'll see. Well, why do you think it turned into a pissing match between Miami and Florida? It's like when NIL struck, it felt like those two teams, and not Florida State. I'm not trying to diminish Florida State, but it felt like Miami and Florida were just going back and forth and seeing who could either outbid the other, or B, take it one step further when it comes to recruiting. Is it because of Ruiz, and is it because of some of the boosters at Florida? Is it that simple?
I mean, nothing is black and white in our world, and you're probably looking at way more colors than even black, white, and gray when it comes to NIL and in this scenario. I mean, this is a landscape that Nevin Shapiro would have thrived in. Wouldn't have had to be so sneaky.
Hit us up on social at OutKick 360. Hunter Withrow with you. 6th and Peabody location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. DeMar Hamlin, Chad, in the news this weekend. We'll hit that in just a moment.
Want to give a quick birthday shout-out. Nolan from Nashville, 21st birthday.
Nice.
Nolan's mom has Nolan out on the town, just getting him hammered on his 21st birthday. I think that's really cool of a mom
right?
to bring him to 6th and Peabody. He was here before the show, walked in. I told Nolan and his mother to try the churro beer. That's a new winter selection with Yeehaw Beer. Very good, a dessert-like beer. So happy birthday to Nolan, big fan of the show, and was in here peering through our glass door, and we invited him in, so wanted to wish Nolan a happy 21st birthday.
Oh, they weren't looking at us. They were looking at Matty Ice's new haircut.
Matty Ice's new haircut is very corporate. It's
Very corporate?
Very corporate.
I think it's very...
I think it looks very like almost
military.
Wall Street. You know, if he slicked it back a
Wall
little more,
Street?
it'd be like Pat Riley. It'd be like Gordon Gekko and Wall Street.
What guard did you go with on the sides, Matt? Do you know? I feel like you need like 2 or 3, like 1 or 2 guards lower, and it's definitely a military.
You think Matt knows the guard length when he goes in, like 1.5?
I think where Matt gets his haircut,
well, that's a 1.
Where
yeah.
Matt gets his haircut, my guess is they only have guard length.
Yeah, that's true. Let's hear. We have no scissors. We're just going to cut it with different guard lengths all the way.
I'm joking with him, but I mean,
no, Matt looks
yeah,
good.
he knows guard
I
length.
like the I like the hair length on Matt.
Scissors
for
or
sure.
guard? Oh, he went scissor cut. Okay, yeah.
Barbershop. Yeah. No, Matt's not going to see a stylist. I'll tell you that
my
much.
bad.
Yeah, there is definitely a male cutting his hair. no female haircuts for Matt. That's not a sexist thing. He's just very old school because he also likes.
Matt, you look great, man.
He also likes the male barber to do the straight razor shave on him when he's done.
Oh yeah,
very old school style.
Hot steam towel, love it.
Hutton, did you go drink with your mom on your 21st birthday?
I did not.
Nolan did.
I did not.
That was an interesting decision, I thought.
You know, I have a summer birthday. I guess technically it's spring birthday, late May. Yeah, so I was in Murfreesboro. That's where I was. I was in school, early summer school.
I was in Knoxville in school.
Had to get those credits.
And I was I'm a little less than a month away from my birthday, so it was the dead of winter.
Oh, I know.
And
that's a big plan.
Yeah.
Every year, Chad's birthday is a celebration.
Let's just say I survived. I'm still here today. That's the good news.
I see the Empire State Building. Let's get to this. Celebrating Philadelphia's victory.
What is
and
going
headed
on?
to the Super Bowl. The Empire State Building in NYC. What have we become? Where everyone gets the trophy, and the idea that I guess there's Philly fans everywhere, so we better celebrate. No. Can you imagine if your favorite team's town or city celebrated the rival, not just the rival, the divisional rival of your New York Giants, or a team that you aspire to be if you're the New York Jets, would be the Philadelphia. The rivalry between the two cities, when I saw this, I'm like, is this a Photoshop or is this real? And I know they throw this up in different colors all the time, but it's their tweet that added into it where they're like, congratulations, Philly, and odd. And Chad, it's our generation. It's our age bracket that have the power to change the colors on the Empire State Building. And for that, I am ashamed.
This is so perplexing to me that it's one of those that's so dumb, Hutton. I have to think, does like the owner of is the Empire State Building even owned by an individual? Is there a group that owns it? Are they connected to Philly in some way? It makes no damn sense. This is a division rival of the New York Giants, the Philadelphia Eagles.
I know.
You're celebrating their... I hate this part of where we are right now. I'm going to sound really old and like I'm an unhappy person. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm both. Who knows? This desire to take joy in everything that everyone does and to have some responsibility for it and to find a way to be happy with whatever the result is, that's not how sports should work. You can't just decide. I'll give you an example here locally in Nashville with the Titans. Titans fans should be pissed off that the Philadelphia Eagles might win a Super Bowl after their guy, A.J. Brown, bitched and complained and got exactly what he wanted. He got the money he wanted. He got traded away. He was a great player for your team. And in year one, he's playing for the Super Bowl. You should be upset about that. You should be enraged. Don't give me this, oh, I'm happy for AJ because I loved him as a Titan. I don't buy it. I don't buy that you're happy for Brett Kern either as a former punter with the Eagles. You have to be upset about things. We can't take joy in every team's success. Stakes have to be raised, Hutton. You have to pick a side. You have to pick a side, and you can't just automatically say, oh, I'm going to be okay with that. That's what the Empire State Building is trying to teach us. Well, that no matter who wins, we all win. I'm seeing Rob Lowe with the NFL logo hat on when I see that green lit up Empire State Building. Makes no sense.
Tony Malkin is the chairman, president, and CEO of Empire State Realty Trust, and they own the Empire State Building, as well as 18 other properties in New York City.
So he's got no Philly ties, to our knowledge.
Not that I'm aware of.
It's so dumb.
Well, you know that this is just like
we can't all be happy all the time.
Yeah.
You can find constructive ways to cope with your sports depression with your teams, but don't sell me this load of BS that no matter who wins, I'm happy for this former player or this former coach that once coached. No, you're not. No, you're not.
New York City native.
Be honest with your own feelings about this from a sports perspective.
Tony Malkin, his Empire. I saw this. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. In today's world, everyone's got to feel accepted and appreciated, I guess. And this is, Eagles were going to be so distraught if the Empire State Building wasn't lit up in their colors.
Well, the worst thing that could happen would be they apologize for it now. If you did it, just stick with it. Or you just changed up and say, did we say Eagles? We meant Jets. We're real excited about the Jets' future. We're excited that Zach Wilson's probably no longer going to be the quarterback, and we were simply celebrating
in honor
the Jets.
of Zach Wilson going to the Eagles as a third-string QB.
In honor of the New York Jets not making the playoffs for another season, we have lit up the Empire State Building green and white after the NFC Championship.
So the emergency quarterback, we haven't seen this in 12 seasons. It was 2010, the last time it came into effect for the postseason, and Caleb Haney was the emergency quarterback in the NFC playoffs when Jay Cutler went out. His backup went out, and then Caleb Haney entered the game. The old rule, for those unfamiliar, every team could designate their third quarterback as the emergency quarterback. And if he entered the game, the other two ahead of him could not re-enter the game. It triggered the emergency QB clause where he didn't count on the game day roster, but he was available in case of emergency, right? It makes sense. If you went to him for a guy who sprained his ankle and you had to tape it up, but the emergency QB went in, you could not go back to the guy on the sideline who was ready to re-enter the game. That was the rule. That was in 2010 as they're negotiating the new NFL collective bargaining agreement with the PA. In 2011, they signed this new agreement, which did away with the emergency quarterback status. And at the time, the emergency quarterback was on a roster on game day of 45 players. The new CBA added a 46th roster spot on game day from your 53-man roster. And this, in effect, was a rare win for the players because the extra spot is a game day paycheck in the regular season. And the practice squad, typically, that was the emergency quarterback. Some teams carried 3, not all. Chad, they did away with it. The owners did with the emergency quarterback. And teams had the extra spot, but to this day, they normally use that extra roster spot, not on a third quarterback, but on an extra safety, an extra defensive lineman, an extra offensive lineman, for further depth that you could play on special teams, that you can rotate in if you need to because you're down a guy or a guy's playing hurt at left tackle, whatever. So they still have the extra spot. They just don't have the designated spot that doesn't count on game day. I do think, though, given the fact that most of the time it's not if something happens, it's when something happens. And the fact this went down in the NFC title game and it made the game unwatchable for what's supposed to be one of the top games of the year, and given the fact of concussion protocol and that it affects one position a lot more than the others, Because if you get up, everyone's watching the quarterback spot. Scrutiny is on the QB. Ask Tua. Ask Teddy Bridgewater. If you get up woozy, if you stumble, you're out. And it's from the eye in the sky. It's from the independent neurologist that's watching over this. And it's not you're out until you pass concussion protocol to get back in. If you are flagged for that, for instability, you're out for the game. And because of this adjustment mid-season to the protocol, I think they've got to adjust the emergency QB status for that alone and not have it count against your game day roster.
What was the rationale behind the change in 2011?
The owners approved this. They got the rare win for the players where the players, instead of the emergency quarterback, and they still had that, instead of 45 players eligible to participate on game day and get the game day check, and one step closer to an accrued season, which if you're more than 3 years accrued, you get pension money. And that was why, we'll get to Damar Hamlin, why it was important that the Bills said they're going to take care of his medical issues because he had not reached 3 seasons accrued to this point. So the 46 roster, you get one more player that's eligible to get there. So that's a win for the players. But they did away with the emergency quarterback because teams were still given the extra roster spot. It just didn't come as a quarterback-specific emergency possibility, if that makes sense.
Here's what I propose for the next CBA. Have both. Have the one extra spot and have an emergency quarterback, even if it's only for the playoffs, just in order to not have what we had happen yesterday happen again.
Well, but also consider...
The NFL can afford it.
Well, then they need to raise the overall roster limit. If it's 53, raise it to 54, because by and large, teams aren't carrying 3 on a roster. And when they had the emergency status, a number of teams were carrying 3. It was unusual if you only went with 2. Practice squads have expanded. And what's unusual about this is in regards to San Francisco, I mentioned this earlier, if you look at the depth chart at Our Lads, that's what I'm going by, which is updated by the day. They had released their practice squad quarterback, Jacob Eason, on January 3rd with the idea that Jimmy Garoppolo was going to come back at some point and he would be the backup and Josh Johnson would go back to being the third-string guy or the practice squad quarterback. They didn't have a practice squad quarterback last week based on the depth chart I saw. So it's not like even if the protocol was the emergency quarterback status is in place, they could have designated a third quarterback. They didn't have one. They had 2 because Garoppolo was supposed to come back, and there was a possibility that he could be the backup to Purdy for the Super Bowl.
I don't know if you saw, there was one shot on Fox during the game where Purdy was, going out there and going through the motions, couldn't throw it, but it was, you saw perfectly, it encapsulated the bad luck of the 49ers because it was Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, both with an earpiece in, both with matching hoodies and stocking caps on, standing there with Brock Purdy. And I had to pause it, and I told Angie, my wife, I said, those are the 2 starting quarterbacks. I said, just so you understand what's going on, this guy with no elbow that's out there right now, that's actually both of them right there huddled up with Brock Purdy. That's how bad this has gone for the 49ers. And Kyle Shanahan, who is an absolute wizard, he got Jimmy Garoppolo to a Super Bowl. Even Kyle Shanahan could do nothing with that situation. No one could.
Well, did you see some of the tweets were, please let the 49ers advance and somehow win this game with Josh Johnson because Garoppolo could have ended up starting in the Super Bowl, potentially.
That would have made for an incredible story.
And the fact that he has a clause in his deal where he's guaranteed to be a free agent, they cannot franchise tag him, and he has a chance to win a Super Bowl and play in his second for San Fran.
You know the America's Game documentaries they do on every Super Bowl champion on NFL Network? What if they did that one just with every quarterback who played? They usually get a cross-section of coach, defensive player, offensive player. I want America's Game 2022-23 49ers with only the quarterbacks who took a snap, including Josh Johnson talking to the camera about the entire season. Josh Johnson's like, I wasn't doing anything halfway through the year, and I got the call and then ended up winning a Super Bowl. That would be great television, but now we'll never see it.
Coming up, we'll discuss what the Texans are doing with their head coaching position. We'll discuss Damar Hamlin as well, who released a video to fans and supporters. That's all straight ahead on OutKick 360.
And how long after 9/11 does your unit, the 160th SOAR, which is the most elite helicopter pilots in the world, how long does it take for you guys to figure out, okay, a plan's being set in motion, we're going to Afghanistan? Was it within days? Was it within weeks? When
It
did
was
you
within
know?
it was within hours.
Within hours.
So we drive back that night, the battalion commander and I, and the next morning I'm sent down in a 15-passenger van with a bunch of other planners to Tampa, Florida, and we're to plan the America's response, as far as the rotary wing side of it. And by October 3rd, I was in the country of Uzbekistan preparing to do personnel recovery for the bombing campaign that was about to kick off.
And this is depicted in the movie 12 Strong. Correct me if I'm wrong, where
Yep.
you guys are going to fly in from Uzbekistan. This is what's known as the horse soldiers. This is going to kind of be the first wave. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So initially we're there for, I want to say about 2 weeks of bombing. And then there is no further plan that we know of. And then all of a sudden, 5th Special Forces Group rolls in. Their commander takes over the task force. We're in Task Force Dagger out of K2 Air Base, Karshi-Kanabad. And he wants a briefing on our capabilities. And so we sat down and we start talking to him about, the mountains and the distances that we can or can't fly, the way the weather is and all these things. And he's like, gee, I wish somebody had told us that ahead of time, and ironically, when I was in Tampa, they were one room over and nobody ever connected us, because it just wasn't considered important, but now it was, especially as they heard that, the mountains were, 20,000 feet and that the weather was horrible and all these things. And so we tell him what we can do. And he goes, well, you guys are going to start doing a UW campaign, which is unconventional warfare. That's where you link up individual operational detachments or ODAs up with factions of the Northern Alliance, which were the allies that we were trying to coordinate with. So it went from there.
So, and I'm glad you brought up the 20,000 feet thing, because I had it in my notes. I wanted to ask you, in the movie, it's depicted that helicopters had never flown that high and they weren't sure whether or not it could be done. Was that how it actually worked in real life, that you guys didn't know if the altitude was even workable?
Yes and no, but not for the reasons that you might think. So helicopters had flown that high. Chinook helicopters routinely fly at 25,000 feet in Alaska, right over the mountains there. They do the rescue mission at the top of that. I was at Mount McKinley, I think. And so it is possible, but using carrying a usable load, going the distance that we need to go as far as, because we had to trade off fuel for cargo, if you will, people. Right. And so the math didn't work out, and we're wearing supplemental oxygen, or how long is that going to last, per console for the people you got on board. So there's a lot of calculations that have to go into this that, really weren't operationally proven. I operated in Colorado all the time, but that's nothing compared to Afghanistan.
And a fast show. OutKick 360 wrapping up from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Hope everyone's great across the OutKick network.
Not gonna lie, Hud, I don't feel great. I think it's just that time of year. You know, everyone around me. Daughter's got a stomach virus over the weekend.
I thought it might
I'm
be.
fine. I'm fine.
You don't feel great because you have a draft tonight?
Got a softball draft tonight. I just got word on the app here on my old ass phone that snow's coming to Nashville, snow and ice. I just don't. I'm in a weird place right now. I don't physically feel all together, and then psychologically now this time of year just has a tendency to start to wear on you, right?
Oh, it's the hurry up and wait for the Super Bowl now, is what it is.
I feel better than Joseph Osai today. I will say that much.
Oh yeah, and how about the player going into the locker room ranting about it, and then the players coming to his defense in the actual locker room session where they're interviewing Osai, who, by the way, was, I thought, stand up when it came to how he handled post-game press.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reaction. Like, that's someone who cares a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And he knows what he did. He immediately knew that he screwed up on that and it was going to be flagged. And once it was, he was dejected. So that was a very human response from him, which I can appreciate.
Has anyone checked on
his teammates had a very human response to their teammate on it, trying to uplift him. I thought it was a terrible moment for a game to end that way, but cool to see his teammates rally around him that way.
So he is having an MRI on that knee today, for reference, because he mentioned that in the post-game presser too. Has anyone checked on the staff member or whoever that was that got crunched and, you know, their head hit against the bench and all that? Did you see this? Like the other guy not the two players, not Mahomes or Osai, but there's a staff member that gets just crushed. And I've been there. Like, luckily I didn't have the heated benches behind me that this person hit.
Whew.
It was hardcore considering you have Osai there with the knee issue.
We'll have
and
to
then
get
the magnitude of that player.
We'll need to get NFL correspondent Armando Salguero on the case to get a comment to see what happened.
Great to see DeMar Hamlin and the statement he put out and on video, so he can put to rest all the conspiracy theories that there was a body double. Here's Hamlin and what he put on social media earlier this weekend.
Well, I'm so thankful to everybody. I know that it isn't enough just to be thankful. This is just the beginning of the impact that I wanted to have on the world. And with God's guidance, I will continue to do wonderful and great things. I couldn't do this without any of the support and the love. And I can't wait to continue to take y'all on this journey with me.
There's Hamlin.
Very cool, and I'm glad that I don't have to hear from Nick on Twitter anymore about the body double conspiracy and how ridiculous that was. The propensity for people in
He's
their
still
mind
not holding a newspaper, though, Chad.
to like see one thing and hold up today's New York Times. Oh, wait, we don't believe in the New York Times, so never mind. It's still a conspiracy theory is probably what they'd come back with. Just ridiculous. Come on. That's him. So now we can move on from that just ludicrous conspiracy theory.
Davey says, he sends me a text. He says, it looks like artificial intelligence. It looks like a deep fake.
No one has said that to me yet. So I did.
Let's go ahead and
I
say,
tweeted. I should find Nick's response because it was. I mean,
it was very nice
to someone that was finally, okay, I'm definitely wrong.
Nick is a season ticket holder of the show, so
even
we
though I was thrown in there. Yeah, it was a very grown up. Most of the time when you get into something with people, online,
very grown up,
they'll just never admit. Once you prove them wrong on something, they walk away and don't respond, and or they won't admit to anything. But Nick was just, and I can't find his response. I've got way too many people.
But he said,
"Yeah,
you're probably right now."
No, he just said, "I'm seeing that. I thank God. I thank the good Lord that he is okay." So that was his response. That he knows that's him and he's okay now. He didn't double down on it, which was good.
Yep. Zach Taylor told the press today in his Monday press conference wrapping up the season for the Bengals that the negotiations for extensions with Joe Burrow start now internally. And so, again, just wrapped up with the team today, and as you go forward, you get a chance to start talking about Joe and all the other players who are up. Joe's not up, by the way. He's just eligible for the extension. And the Bengals know they need to this doesn't need to be a process like we've seen with Lamar Jackson or like we saw with Dak Prescott, because Cincy and the ownership and the liquidity that we've pointed to with Bisciotti, with Haslam, with Jerry Jones, it's different than what we've seen from the Bengals in the past.
Did you hear, I think it was Jim Nantz during the broadcast yesterday, they'll point out, which was clearly to me something from Cincinnati management that said, keep in mind, this is an organization that at one point made Carson Palmer the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. They're prepared, and that he's going to make $50 million a year. Joe Burrow, they believe. But I thought that was just an interesting tidbit that he brought that up, because I looked into it and thought that's coming from someone in Cincinnati.
They can make him the quote-unquote highest paid quarterback annually, but the benefit of previous contracts prior to what we've seen from Deshaun Watson is it leans heavily in the ownership and team club favor, where you can back out of said agreement and get help on the salary cap on the back end and set up to what, well, you know, A.J. Brown's contract. What is it, a 5-year deal that's really a 2-year contract?
Right.
So you can make it, adjust it however you see fit with the guaranteed money up front. But the key here is it's not fully guaranteed. And there's only a handful of quarterbacks right now that have the opportunity to do what Watson did. Lamar Jackson's in that discussion with how he's handled this. Burrow, Herbert. And how do you feel if you're Kellen Moore today? You go from Dak Prescott to Justin Herbert. You get to call plays for Justin Herbert and the Chargers instead of Dallas, where, I mean, you have a lame duck coaching staff there right now. Let's face it. I mean, I know Mike McCarthy did well in the regular season, but with Prescott and McCarthy paired up, it doesn't seem like they're going to get over that hump anytime soon. And Dallas has been saying that for decades now. Meanwhile, Kellen Moore, he's headed to Los Angeles, where the Chargers need help to stop the run, but otherwise have a very talented roster and one of the top young quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, it's
on a rookie contract.
It strikes me as McCarthy and Kellen Moore did not see eye to eye on much of anything. And that this is an upgrade, you could argue, for Kellen Moore to go work with Herbert now, but
I think this is Jerry Jones.
Yeah, I also think both sides were probably blaming the other.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yes.
Our offensive-minded head coach has too much control and say over what's going on. Mike McCarthy, this young guy calling plays, isn't doing a good enough job. And who is Jerry Jones going to side with? His head coach that he pays more, and he says, yeah, let me get Sean on line 3 and figure it and think, I'm going to find out what he thinks about both of you. But he probably said, okay, offense doesn't work. You figure it out. You're an offensive head coach, and now he's the offensive coordinator.
I think it is a massive decision by Dan Quinn to come back. Because, Chad, he's turned down now 2 consecutive seasons of head coaching opportunities. Dan Quinn's been mentioned both off seasons. He could be in line to get that job. And I don't know if McCarthy's back, honestly. If Dan Quinn gets a head coaching job, because he's replacing both coordinators, why wouldn't you clean house at that point?
Just trade for Sean Payton and then let Dan Quinn continue to be the defensive coordinator. That would be the ideal scenario.
Well, after next year, you don't have to trade for him. His contract's up. Yeah. No, it's through 2024. You're right. There's still another year left.
Well, maybe Dan Quinn will stick around.
Maybe they'll only take a 3rd-round pick, though.
Maybe Dan Quinn will see 4 different Cowboys head coaches in his tenure and wait around.
Back at it tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern, across the OutKick Network for OutKick 360.